Welcome back to the State of Things. My name is Jacob Ludwig, and I am your 69th president of the student body.
And I am Jaden Ahlrichs, just your vice president of the student body.
How you doing today, Jaden?
I am doing great. It is a rainy day here on campus, but it's also Friday before homecoming, or of homecoming. You know, we play West Virginia tomorrow, so I'm really hoping our boys out on the field do well. I really hope they do well. But there's the big pep rally tonight. There was free food all week on campus. And so I think just overall, homecoming, always a fun time to be at Iowa State.
Yeah, definitely. This is, I think, one of the best times of the year to kind of celebrate, our Cyclone traditions and kind of come together as a community.
Yeah, so if you are a first-time listener here, the State of Things, this is where Jacob and I have the opportunity to talk about the activities of student government, what we've been up to, but then we also get to bring in special guests from around campus to talk about what is actually happening in the Iowa State community. And so I know we have a great guest lined up for later in the episode, and so stay tuned for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but first up, I think we'll just talk about, some of the things that student government's been up to recently. You want to kick us off?
Yeah, so 2 meetings ago now, student government Senate meetings, we actually pushed Senate back an hour. We normally start at 6, so we started Senate at 7, but from 5 to 7, we had the Ames City Council members here in the Memorial Union with a joint meeting with all of our senators. And so it was a big, great 2-hour meeting. We talked on a lot of different things that we just want to see, like more collaboration between the city and the students. And so to touch on a few of our topics, majority of the meeting, I think about an hour 15, was focused on mental health, about how Iowa State is dealing with that, and then collaboration with the city. I know they're going to be having different conversations that are city-based at the City Hall, and so look out for more of those. And then also a big thing we talked about was Cyclone Welcome Weekend, and kind of reflecting on how that actually went, as this was the inaugural year for that. And so, we obviously heard great things on the Iowa State side of things, but then we had Chief Huff, the chief of the Ames City Police, in kind of talking about it from their point of view, and then just students. We obviously had the Senate there, really bringing that student voice and kind of connection between the city council and student government. I think one more thing I wanted to put out there is the city is really looking for students to be engaged with them. I mean, Iowa State students make up about half of the population of the city of Ames. And so it's really important for us to be involved with the city government. I know a few years ago, it was a big deal that Rachel Junct, a chemical engineer here at Iowa State, ran and successfully won her election and is a representative on the city council. And so that was a big thing. But there's so many different boards and commissions that students can just go to the City of Ames website. I know you're involved with several of them, but they can get involved and sit on those types of boards. I think the terms are 3 years, and unless you graduate and leave early, but those are just great ways to get involved that are, more than the Iowa State community.
Yeah, and like you said, I'm involved with a couple different boards and commissions, and they're a great way to get involved in the community. And you can do the full 3-year term if you're here that long. They also have like special appointments that last just a year, and they can kind of re-up you. But it's a great way to get involved with the city. Like Jaden was talking about, we do represent half of the population of this town, and that's why the city council meets with the student senate twice a year in joint session, and we talk about some of these things because challenges like mental health, that we're facing here on the Iowa State campus, we're also dealing with out in the Ames community. The Ames Public School District is, has been grappling with a lot of mental health challenges over the last year. And so I know that Mayor Hala is really interested in finding ways where we can maybe pool our resources together to support the broader community. Can we do more together for everyone rather than kind of creating two separate sets of infrastructure, But I think, looking past the city council meeting, which I think was a really awesome opportunity, we got a Board of Regents meeting coming up, here in a week or so. We'll be heading over to Council Bluffs to the Iowa School of the Deaf and the Blind. That's where the meeting is going to be hosted in November. So we'll be going there with the representatives and student leaders from the other two Regent universities. And I think that we've got some really big things on the agenda this time. You know, last time we went through and we had our legislative priorities, so we talked about the things that we wanted to see the board request in terms of funding for the next fiscal year. You know, mental health was one of the big things that come out of that. And so this meeting, you know, we're going to probably finish up some of those conversations just because the last meeting was kind of when they were first introduced. Now they have to be finalized at this next meeting. But then, you know, we've also got other conversations specifically around campus safety. You know, I know that there's conversations, you know, on this campus about, you know, what that relationship between students and police looks like. And, you know, that's a similar conversation happening on the other two Regent University campuses. And so we'll have we're going to have a conversation about those campus safety things, like the Clear Air Reporting Act. So, you know, the federal law that requires the reporting of, you know, campus crimes, specifically like sexual assaults. So, you know, when those things happen on campus, you know, if it's reported within a certain number of days, then the university has to send an email out. So go over kind of the annual report from that and talk about how we can, you know, make sure that our campuses, you know, are safe and feel safe and students feel supported. So another big Board of Regents meeting coming down the pipeline here, and yeah, just really looking forward to those conversations.
And I think the big last thing that I want to talk about that student government has been involved in and flows right into the conversation with our special guest today was October was Green Dot Month. And so as student leaders in a student organization on campus, we tried to do some things. And so our cabinet went through the hour-long bystander Green Dot training. And so we all the cabinet members have that training under their belt and can talk more about what Green Dot is, the 3 Ds of distract, delegate, and direct. And so I know a lot of us, we distributed Green Dot pins that we can talk about. In one of the meetings, we all wore Green Dot and took a picture and was able to post that on social media. And so, I mean, that flows right into our special guest.
Yeah, on the podcast today, we're going to have a conversation with Brian Vanderheyden, who is the Director of Student Health and Wellness. You know, so yeah, he works a lot with Green Dot, works a lot with all of these student wellness programs that are under that division. He's a fantastic resource. He's everywhere, working 24/7. Sometimes I don't know if he really has business hours per se. I feel like he's here on campus most evenings, and I know he's here in the morning, so I feel like he's doing more than his 40 hours every week. But yeah, you know, Jaden and I both know Brian pretty well because we sat down with him last year when we were kind of getting our campaign together and, you know, looking at some of the things that we wanted to do this year. And he was a great resource and provided a lot of insight on how we can have, you know, what student government could do to have a positive impact on the, you know, health and well-being of students on this campus.
Yeah, so catch that conversation with Brian Vanderheyden right after this commercial break.
Jaden, can you believe the weather we're having outside right now? It is literally pouring cats and dogs. I'm sitting here in sector and I'm like, I don't want to go out to my classes or any meetings that I have because if I go outside, I'm going to get sopping wet. And who wants to sit in the classroom when they're like sopping wet? So like, what am I supposed to do? Because I don't want to go outside and get wet, but I need to go to my classes.
Sundar, do I have a solution for you? Student government actually has an umbrella program where you can rent an umbrella for 48 hours for completely free. All you have to do is look up Iowa State University umbrella program online and reserve an umbrella that you can pick up either at the information desk in Parks Library or the information desk on the second floor of the Memorial Union. And you can walk around campus completely rain-free. And all you have to do when you're done is return it to either one of those locations. And bada bing, bada boom, you're no longer sitting in class sopping wet on a rainy day.
That is absolutely amazing. I'm going to go get an umbrella right now.
Okay, with us today is Brian Vanderheyden, the Director of Student Wellness here at Iowa State University.
Yeah.
Welcome to the pod, Brian.
Yeah. Thanks, Jaden. Thanks, Jacob. Happy to be here.
Yeah.
Happy Friday.
Yes, we are
Yeah.
very happy to have you here. Hopefully you had a short walk from Friley, especially today is a very rainy day here
It's
on
raining.
campus.
Yeah, my
so-
socks are still wet, so I'm gonna experience that for a while.
Yeah, I had a meeting this morning, and I walked maybe 50, 100 feet from my car
Mhm.
to the door. By the time I got inside the building, my pants were just soaked.
Yep.
And I was just like, I had an umbrella, so like luckily my shirt and everything was fine. But I
Yep.
was sitting in the meeting like trying to focus, but my legs are just wet.
Yep.
And
Yep.
it was not an enjoyable experience.
No. Mm-mm.
My woe story from this morning was I had an umbrella in one hand, I've got like a reusable bag in the other, it's just a change of clothes, and then I had like the cup of coffee that was for free
Yes.
on Central Campus today
Yes.
because it's homecoming. And the cap didn't get popped on all the way, and so I did something wrong with my hand. And that's why my sleeves are rolled up today, is
Yeah.
because I spilled coffee down my
Oh,
arm.
no.
So we
Mhm.
love the rain.
Yep. We love it.
Love it. Well, Brian,
Yeah.
talk to us a little bit about what you do as Director of Student Wellness.
Yeah. So student wellness is actually a pretty new department to Iowa State University. So we actually had our ribbon cutting ceremony back in 2017. So we just celebrated our 5-year anniversary in February, which is pretty exciting. So previously, so I'm going to give you a little history. I was working in Teal Student Health Center. They had a smaller kind of prevention department. And at that time, like the scope of it was pretty limited. And the senior vice president for student affairs at the time, Dr. Hill, had kind of charged a smaller group with thinking about, how do we really kind of enhance student well-being on campus, right? So our recommendation basically to Dr. Hill was to bring in a consulting firm that kind of looked broad scope at our infrastructure. And really what they found was that we were one of the few universities that actually did not have kind of a comprehensive health and well-being program at Iowa State. So they kind of, essentially that was one of the pieces that led to the creation of student wellness and also to the creation of the Student Health and Wellness Unit. So in 2018, Teal Student Health Center, Student Counseling Services, Recreation Services, and Student Wellness all organizationally aligned together as a Student Health and Wellness Unit as a newer structure in the Division of Student Affairs. So prior to that, Recreation Services, I believe, was in the Dean of Students area. Student Wellness wasn't a thing. So, we were kind of all in different spots. So it made sense just because kind of the more national movement is thinking about if we're really going to provide holistic health and well-being care, having those kind of more centralized when we think about, that continuum of care and support for students from the kind of prevention lens all the way to kind of the service delivery and treatment lens, really kind of having that kind of broad thing together. So as director of student wellness, so our area really focuses in on health promotion. So I have a background in master's in public health and in higher education. I knew from a, probably junior year of college that I really wanted to do health promotion work in higher education setting because, my first year of undergrad, I really struggled. Mental health, struggling with substance use, all sorts of stuff. And it was really my mentors and advisors I went to the University of Wisconsin La Crosse, and they really helped me in terms of, my success in continuing through. Because I was thinking about dropping out, even though I had straight A's. I had 4.0, and I was still thinking about dropping out because I just was struggling so much. So, I personally know the impact that health and well-being has to student success, to learning, to engagement. And my, interest area was public health, so I really wanted to think about, how can I, have a career that really is focused on supporting student well-being, really. So that's how I got here today. So that's kind of a little background story. So my role really in student wellness as director is really to provide campus leadership around health promotion. So a lot of the work that we talk about is how do we create a culture of well-being on campus. So what I mean by that is really how are we embedding health and well-being into everything that we do, into our systems, our policies, our practices, our academic mandates, right? Because I would say broadly, our society, really, when we think about health and well-being, we really focus more on the service delivery aspect of it, which is important, right? Individual medicine, healthcare. But when we think about it in terms of kind of broader impact and importance, oftentimes public health sometimes gets missed, and the health promotion part gets missed. So really, I really view my role too as really providing leadership and direction and, working with senior leaders around how do we really build health promotion infrastructure at ISU and how do we really start to create that culture of well-being that we know that impacts students and really everybody, faculty, staff, everybody, right? So creating a campus culture, creating that environment, really working at more of that kind of systems level approach to health promotion, to public health, to improve student well-being. So that's kind of my high-level focus area. So my department, we have variety of staff that work in kind of different functional areas. So substance use, mental health, power-based personal violence, basic needs support. We have a joyful eating program with dietitian services that does a lot in terms of like eating disorder prevention, food insecurity, all those kinds of things. So we kind of have a broad kind of scope. We also do a lot of peer-to-peer work. So a lot of like student-to-student programming and outreach. So we have a couple different like internships, our pre-wellness educator program, our student leadership board that really works collectively with us to think about, you know, how are we engaging and connecting with students in that peer-to-peer lens too. So we do a lot of like, you know, peer-led support groups, workshops, all those kinds of things that we know are helpful for students. So yeah.
Well, I have to start off by saying, wow.
Yeah. That's a lot, sorry.
No, that was, I mean, I have known about student wellness
Mhm.
since, I mean, I came on campus as a freshman, but I didn't know to the extent
Mhm.
that student wellness was working in all those different areas that you mentioned. And I mean,
Mhm.
only being, you know, 5 years old in February, you
Yeah.
said,
Mhm.
that's a lot of undertaking for the first 5 years.
It's a lot, yeah, and we've grown a lot. So it started obviously as one person. So when I started in student wellness, I was the assistant director. And there's two of us, and now we have 7 professional staff, 7 or 8 grad students, and about 30 undergrad employees in our office, plus like volunteers and other interns that help with this. So I mean, we've really grown in a very short amount of time. But I think that shows the tremendous need and importance that Iowa State is really focusing when we think about student health and well-being, right?
Mhm.
Like this was one area that Iowa State didn't really have a ton of infrastructure at the time around. So that's really what we've been focusing on is how do we build that infrastructure around public health, health promotion, prevention, you know, more broadly, because we know that those are critical elements. Oftentimes, like I was saying earlier in society, we tend to focus on more of the response or curative approach, but sometimes lack the more proactive approach. And I always
Mhm.
like to say those need to be in alignment and in balance.
Mhm.
And if they're like this, you know, that's not helpful kind of to the broader, really to the broader campus community.
So I know a project that Student Wellness just undertook,
Yeah.
kind of thinking about the direction of, you know, what Student Wellness is going to be doing in the future.
Yes.
Is the big focus group project you guys just
Yes.
undertook, and you just published like the executive summary. I didn't know if you
Yes.
could touch on that real quick.
Yeah, sure can. So I'll share a little bit kind of the bigger, so that's kind of a piece of a bigger project that we're working on. So kind of part of that infrastructure I was talking about is thinking of how do we really build this kind of broader health promotion infrastructure at Iowa State, right? And Iowa State has never done, to our knowledge, a pretty robust health and wellness needs assessment for students, right? So what we wanted to do is really kind of look at it in 3 different components. So the first was thinking about quantitative data. We have a ton of, you all know, how many surveys do you take a year? Too many. We have a ton of quantitative data on campus and a lot that collects information on student health and well-being. But a lot of times it's on totally different areas on campus. It's not centralized, right? It's not like we don't look at it together. So what we did was we brought a lot of that together for the last kind of 3 fiscal years. And we started to see kind of really to make observations around what data do we have, what data do we not have, and where are maybe some opportunities that we could think about expanding our data infrastructure, right? In terms of streamlining data, thinking about, you know, if we have a ton of surveys that are asking the same thing, do we really need that, right? How do we minimize survey fatigue, but also get better results that are aligned with some of our priority areas, right? So that was kind of one piece. The second was that we did not, to my knowledge, again, have any information directly from students when it came to like qualitative data. We were like, we need to do that. So, so we did a pretty robust qualitative study. So we worked with who is now Dr. Laura Triplett. She was our grad student, but now is working at the CDC in Atlanta. So shout out to her. She's amazing. So she actually helped in terms of, so she had a background in public health and actually her kind of specialty areas in qualitative research. So she really put together the methodology behind the focus groups. Our focus was because we're using a health equity lens in all of the kind of needs assessment that we're doing. So in our qualitative data, we're looking at, do we disaggregate by student population? If we don't, why don't we? And then for the qualitative part, we really wanted to kind of center lots of different student identities within that. So we had, a part of our recruitment, students were selecting, kind of what identities do they hold. If they had kind of multiple identities that we were looking at, they were able to kind of pick the one that was most salient to them in terms of where they wanted to participate, right? So we had a couple focus groups for each of our different kind of populations. So international students, students of color, LGBT students, financially insecure students, transfer students, non-traditional students, students with disabilities. There's more. So we had kind of a bigger list, and our grad student was the one that kind of led all those. So they were peer-led, 90 minutes, and we paid all students to be part of it. So all students got a $75 gift card. I think it's important to pay students for their time and labor. We did that. We had, again, 201 students that participated, so it's a pretty big qualitative study. And our grad student this past summer did all the transcription, the coding, all stuff that I have no idea how to do. So I'm really glad that we have awesome students that can do all that. And then put together the results. And then what we were able to do is work with our student leadership board to kind of review all that and then kind of put together some different recommendations based on that. And we kind of had really kind of 4 kind of main areas that we focused on and that emerged, and that was around basic needs, mental health, substance use, and power-based personal violence. So those were kind of the main elements. From our quantitative data, those are really kind of the things that we saw in terms of like prevalence of issues or, kind of just different metrics that we were looking at. Those are really kind of the ones that stood out to us. So we wanted to do kind of a deeper dive into that. And again, kind of make sure that we had a really representative group of kind of all students across campus in our entire community. And to also see the differences too, right? Like students experience all these things very differently, and their identities play a role in how they experience campus life, right? So we also asked questions in there specifically around barriers that they experience connected to their identity and others. So we were really excited about it. So that was kind of that second part of that needs assessment. The last part that we're finishing up right now, is really kind of a broader self-assessment of Iowa State. So when we think about, particularly from a prevention and a health promotion lens, right, like what strategies, what programs, what interventions and things are in kind of best practice or evidence-based strategies. So we looked at a bunch of different publications. We pulled them all together in this kind of bigger self-assessment tool. So we looked at 181 strategies, but then also looked at various different things like budgets or staffing levels, all sorts of stuff, really to kind of get a sense around where are we at and where do we need to go, right? So kind of where are we at with a lot of these things and what opportunities. We have a lot of strengths, right? What are some of those strengths? But then where do we have some opportunities for growth? So kind of taking all those 3 components together, we're actually working on our bigger report right now, which we're hoping will be done by the end of the semester. But that is really going to focus on where can we continue to go in terms of building our health promotion infrastructure on campus. So it's kind of a long-winded answer, but it's a bigger project. It's about a year-long project. We're really excited about it because I think there's going to be, we already have pages and pages of recommendations from it, but I think it'll give us some really clear, tangible things rooted in data, rooted in best practice that'll help us in terms of next steps of where we can go at Iowa State. So we're excited about it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think, especially with just, there's always a conversation about budgetary constraints and like how can we make the most efficient use of our dollars. And so knowing what those kind of targeted actions that we can take that have the highest impact is just critical. I know that we're here at the start of November. Green Dot Month just ended, which was October. Do you want to talk for a little bit about how you think Green Dot Month went? And then maybe a brief explainer at the beginning about what Green Dot is in case someone hasn't heard about it.
Yeah, so Green Dot is really kind of a broader power-based personal violence prevention strategy, right? So when I say power-based personal violence, what I mean by that is within the context of Green Dot is sexual assault, stalking, and dating violence, right? There are other forms of power-based personal violence, bullying, discrimination, harassment, etc. Green Dot focused specifically on those 3. And really what it looks at is it's taking more of that bystander intervention and bystander education lens, which we know is an important component when we think about overall prevention. It's not the only strategy. I always tell folks that. I was like, when you think about a comprehensive approach, particularly to something that's complex, like power-based personal violence. There is no one magic solution, right? It takes a comprehensive approach of a lot of different strategies. So Green Dot is one that really focuses in on bystander education and intervention skill development. And then the other part of that is really thinking about how do we establish norms on campus. One, that power-based personal violence is not tolerated. And then two, that everybody has a role. So that everybody has a role piece is really key in terms of like when we talk about Green Dot Action Month, in terms of where we focus. So again, Green Dot Action Month is really focused on proactively working on prevention in all of our spaces, right? So it can't just be me or my area going out and being able to solve everything, right? It takes all of us to do that, right? So Green Dot is really about, or Green Dot Action Month is really a we call it a community mobilization strategy. It's kind of public health jargon. Essentially what that means is we all have a role, right? And how do we do all this work in our own spaces, right? How do we do that collectively? So what folks do is we have a really simple kind of form that they kind of fill out. Our staff works directly with different departments, different areas, to really think about how can they kind of proactively do things in their space that are educating people about Green Dot proactively, that are working on skill development, or that they're having conversations and discussing or building things in sustainably into their, office culture, into their student organization, et cetera. So again, it's really kind of that, it's different from like a typical like awareness month that you might see, right? Like this is really thinking about changing the norms on campus and really focused on getting everybody involved and doing things in their own spaces. So for example, a couple different, things that folks did, so like recreation services, they had all of their fitness instructors wear green on certain days, and as they, right before class, they were kind of talking about Green Dot and had people kind of share out different proactive things that they were doing, that day or in that month. Teal Student Health Center, kind of funny, they didn't actually, so they wanted to get some green Band-Aids because they were doing flu shot clinics, and they couldn't find green Band-Aids except for pickles. So we had pickle Band-Aids because they were the only green ones. But students loved them. But it created the opportunity, so when they were done with flu shot, they were directly able to talk with a student about Green Dot every single time, right? So it's thinking about in your own spaces, right? Like the natural things that you all are doing, right? Like health centers already doing flu shots. So how am I engaging in conversations with students at that point in time about violence prevention, right? So that's kind of the point of the month, is kind of thinking about building that in. Department of Residence, they had all of their RAs, because they do rounds in the floors, right, where Green Dot shirts, but also have some talking points. So when they're kind of doing knock and talks and visiting with students on their rounds, they're talking and handing out things about Green Dot. So again, everybody has kind of their own unique spin and take on it based on things that they're already doing, right? And it's just infusing Green Dot into that so that we have kind of this regular ongoing conversation, talk, proactive nature about educating folks about it. So that's kind of the purpose of the month. It was a really successful month. This is only, I think, the second or third time that we've kind of been doing this, I would say, so still pretty new. But we think we had, last I looked, 65 different departments or organizations that participated, with over 11,000 folks that we had documented. So that's that's like a third of campus. That's really great, right? Obviously, we want to keep that going, but for the second or third year, we're thrilled with the types of things that people are doing, the ways that they're engaging, and that's only the things that we have documented. I know that there's probably other folks that did some things and maybe just didn't fill out the form or something. That's like, the only way we can really track it, but it was really cool to see. So that's kind of like the purpose and the intent of it. We're excited. We have kind of different things throughout the year that kind of really focus on community building and community mobilization. That's kind of our big kind of month one in October.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it's cool. It's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
I hadn't heard the number 11,000 people participating. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Phenomenal, really. For anyone who maybe didn't get the chance to do engage with the program this last month, or maybe some student organizations, how might they get access to training or engage with Green Dot going forward?
It's a really good question. So on our Student Wellness website, we have kind of two options. So folks can request if they want some of the training. We actually have 3 different types of training. They can request that for their group. So if they want to do it like as a student organization together, they can do that. Or we have ones where we have like pre-scheduled times throughout the year, and folks can just individually sign up to attend. right? So folks, we try to make it as accessible as possible. So some folks like to do it together as a group. Some folks just want to go individually to one that's already signed up. So the 3 different types of training that we have one that's just kind of a general overview, right? To kind of give you the high level, what is bystander intervention, what are some things you can do, kind of goes through some scenarios, those kinds of things. Kind of the heart of it is there's a 3-hour training, bystander training, what it's called, that really goes a lot more in depth in terms of like skill development. And then our last session that we have is called what we call Green Dot Enhance. And that's really a booster session. So that's really for folks that have already participated in something Green Dot, and it's really to kind of build and enhance on their skills. So we know that anytime we do health education, it's important to have kind of booster sessions throughout to kind of maintain people's skills. Bystander intervention is really hard. A lot of it is driven by social norms, right? I think all of us can think about times where we were in a situation where we wanted to do something and maybe we froze, or maybe we didn't know what to do, right? So we wanted to think about having opportunities for folks, when they go through that training, to be able to kind of maintain some of those skills kind of over time. So the Green Dot Enhance is perfect for kind of like an annual thing, that folks can go through, departments, offices, whatever, that stuff. So those are different ways folks can get involved. The other way that they can get involved is a newer program, what we call is the Green Dot Network. And that's really thinking about, so you get to, with one of my staff members, kind of in like a more of a consulting type relationship, where, let's say, Jaden, you sign up for it for your organization. We'll work directly with you to kind of create a more sustainable plan about how you're building Green Dot into your organization or into your department, into your office, kind of long term. Because really the point with Green Dot is about embedding it into campus culture, right? It's important that we do trainings. I always tell people trainings are the starting point. That's not the finish line. It's the starting point. Once you do some of the training, it's like, how are you sustaining and building that into everything that we do, right? So the Green Dot Network is something that folks can opt into, and then we'll support them in terms of coming up with a year-long plan. So Department of Residence this year is one of the groups that is doing that. So as an example, every single month they have something throughout the entire year that's focused on Green Dot. They have some different competitions. They have different programs and things that we're doing connected to that. So it's a cool way to, again, it's not just a one and done thing. It's we're constantly talking about this. We're constantly working on it. We're constantly working to get better. So the Green Dot, so there's really kind of 2 ways that I think, for folks listening, if they're wanting to get involved, there's all the training sign up, particularly if they're new or if you have done it already. The enhanced session is a really great one. And then also the network. So kind of talking with folks in your organization or others about kind of getting involved in that and thinking about how can you build in some sustainable stuff around violence prevention into your kind of everyday lives, basically.
I think from my own personal experience, how you talked a lot about kind of incorporating it into the culture of campus.
Yes.
Your logo is just, that green dot.
Yep.
And I see that everywhere.
Yes.
It's there's stickers on the side of the ISU police department cars. And a lot of student government members wear the pins on,
appreciate that.
on anything. And so, I mean, even I used to be an RA. And so the Department of Residence does a lot with green dot as well. And so I even think just, having that green dot out there and then, if someone doesn't know what it is, like, why is there a green dot on the wall? It's something that spurs that conversation.
Yep.
And, I think we're doing a great job. I mean, there's obviously room for expansion.
Yep.
But just, putting that green dot places and starting those conversations about what that is.
Yeah, and that's actually a huge part of the strategy. So they have it's a pretty robust, like they call it social marketing, again, more kind of jargon term, but thinking about how do you really brand that across campus and infuse it into everything, right? Because we always talk about when somebody steps on campus, how do you know that power-based personal violence is not tolerated, right? Like, so if I'm a new student coming to campus, how do I know that this institution cares about my safety, right? So I kind of walk people through an example of, like, if I'm a new student and I come in and at orientation, as part of their opening thing, which we just started this year, is they're talking about Green Dot and their opening thing. And then they go to a session and they see us at the resource fair. And then they're coming in for Destination Iowa State and they hear it as part of the opening thing. And then they go into their residence hall and they're seeing it as a door deck on there. And in their first community conversation or floor meeting, the RA is talking about it with them, right? And then they go into class and they bring it in and there's something in class, right? Like that starts to create the culture that shows that the institution values and prioritizes this, because at so many points along the way, I'm getting information, I'm seeing it, I know that it's a priority, right? So that's what Green Dot, I think what is so great about the strategy is that is really what it's working to do, right? So that Green Dot, one, it's a really great conversation starter because if folks don't know what it is, you can tell them about it. And that's actually part of the reasoning behind it. But then the other part too is that when you see it everywhere, right, like that starts to contribute to like, right, seeing it in multiple spaces and knowing that the institution is not only working towards it, but is really kind of pushing to kind of continue to get better and embed it over time. So it's a big part of the strategy. I mean, obviously we have room for growth in a lot of that, but Green Dot's been at Iowa State for maybe 4-ish years. It's actually an international program. So they use it it's in the military, it's in communities, it's in K-12 schools. It's kind of all over. So that's really kind of a central component of the overall program.
And I do want to give a quick shout out to
Yeah.
the University of Northern Iowa. They
Hey,
just introduced
they sure
Green
did.
Dot a few months ago.
Mhm.
And so Jacob and I were up there for a Board of Regents meeting, and
Yep.
they had yard signs all around campus about the introduction of Green Dot.
Yep.
And so that's great seeing
Yep.
them jumping on board with
Yep.
that.
Yeah, our office helped. We had a couple like back and forth conversations with them as they were getting started. So it's always fun to connect with some of our other institutions, and because we're all in the work together, right? We're all are supporting the same mission, so it's helpful to all work together and share ideas and stuff. So yeah, it's a good shout out. They're great.
Yeah, I think next I'd really love to talk a little bit about the Collegiate Recovery
Yeah.
Network. You just came to one of our student senate meetings a couple weeks back, and some members of the student wellness team,
Yep.
and kind of shared about this
Yeah.
program that students can engage with.
Yeah. So Collegiate Recovery Community is a newer program to Iowa State. And we're actually, I think it's like 150, 160 institutions across the country. So out of the 4,000 some that actually have a specific program dedicated to support students in recovery. So when we talk about recovery, those are students who are either seeking or in recovery from either some sort of chemical or behavioral addiction, right? Oftentimes, a lot of times that's substance use, but it can be other things as well. From kind of national data, we see that usually about 1 to 2% of college students identify as being in recovery. But then when you look at folks that are seeking recovery, that tends to get closer to like that 8 to 10-ish%, right? So it's a huge group of students. And when you look at data, particularly around retention, learning, academic performance, et cetera, college environment can be really challenging for somebody that's in recovery or seeking recovery, right? Having a support system in place not only helps enhance their learning, but also helps folks stay in school. So there's actually been some really great studies from other institutions that have done like collegiate recovery type programs that have showed that their students not only have higher GPAs than the kind of general student body, but also are retained at higher because of the support that they have, which helps them persist and graduate through school. So our collegiate recovery community really follows a peer support model. So we have an awesome staff member. His name is Ryan Doyle. He oversees our substance use initiatives and also our collegiate recovery community program on campus. So we have a variety of options for students. We have weekly peer support meetings. So those are led by a grad student as well as an undergrad that helps with leading those in our Be Well space, which is in the student services building. Those are all confidential. So students that get connected, it's all confidential support. We also have one-on-one recovery coaching. So I'm sure you all are like familiar with academic coaching, right? So this is really around kind of skill development of thinking about kind of navigating and enhancing skills connected to recovery, but also around navigating support options and other kinds of things, right? So it's not treatment, it's not counseling. It's really kind of coaching to help with some skill development, to help in terms of like persisting and working. And so a lot of times they'll focus too, even just on general like academic goals and well-being goals and other things, even just beyond recovery specific. So it's kind of a little bit more of a holistic approach. So we have some one-on-one peer support there as well. And then there's a student organization, Collegiate Recovery Student Organization, that's connected to us too. So our staff member advises that. And they do a ton of just like community building efforts. So paint nights, movie nights, just like fun stuff, right? For folks to be able to build community and be together. And that peer support kind of lens, like all those different components together, is such a critical component when you think about success for students that are in recovery or seeking recovery on a higher ed campus. The other piece that is part of this program that we just launched in this last year too is a recovery ally training. When we think about, particularly with recovery and with substance use, like the stigma is so high. A lot of the students that reach out to us are very fearful about being identified, about what consequences might come to them, right? So like that's why we have it set up in the way where it's confidential. We have like students can do kind of like an intake meeting to kind of get connected. We've had a lot of students already this year that have gotten connected to some of those, which is really great. But you know, and kind of what I was sharing earlier, like it's more than just kind of the service delivery piece of it. We also got to think about the broader culture, right? So how can we work with the entire campus community to learn more about how do we create recovery positive spaces for students, right? How do we work around language and inclusive language when we're talking about folks with recovery? And then also how do we have skills that if we are having conversations with folks, how do we help support them and get them connected to support, right? So that's a lot of what that training really focuses on. You get a really cool t-shirt afterwards. So
I was going to mention the t-shirt.
It's great if you want to do it. So we have kind of an intro, like 90-minute one. We're also going to be developing a longer kind of 3-hour one. There's so much content, like 90 minutes is just not sufficient. But it's a really good like intro thing. What also folks get as part of that is like a placard that they can put outside their door that talks about Recovery Ally and saying, you know, like, going to continue to learn and kind of do the work around creating space for folks so that really kind of as a visual piece, right? So as students are walking across campus and they see some of those placards outside of different doors and things, they know like this is somebody that, you know, has gone through some skill development training, and if I talk with them, I know that they're going to support me and help me get connected to support. Again, that's kind of fighting kind of some of that kind of broader stigma piece. So there's a lot of universities, even some of our Big 12 partners, West Virginia, Texas Tech, Baylor, Oklahoma, they all have collegiate recovery programs. We actually kind of modeled some of our stuff off of them, and they also have some recovery ally programs and things too that we're all kind of working together around how can we continue to enhance that. So yeah, there's a lot of components to it. Again, it's only been about a year and a half, so like Ryan has done a great job with building all of those things and kind of building the community up. So our big focus for this next year or two is just kind of really getting the word out about it. So I appreciate the opportunity to kind of share more about it here. You know, just to kind of get as many students as we can connected to the support. And then, you know, for students that, you know, particularly connected to substance use, you know, maybe they're not kind of ready in terms of like being in recovery, but still want to work on, you know, maybe they're using substances in a way that they kind of recognize as maybe not how they want to be using, and kind of we take more of that harm reduction approach, right? Mm-hmm. They can also connect to our office and work directly with Ryan, who's our substance use person, around strategies and different things. So we have a well-being coaching program, which again is led by students, totally confidential. It's usually a couple sessions, like 2 sessions, and it's really focused on thinking about it's student-led, so kind of thinking about how can I think about substance use and kind of the way that I'm using, and thinking about how can I create kind of that better relationship and kind of reduce some of those personal kind of consequences that I might be experiencing in a way that so I can use that kind of limits that as much as possible, right? So we have some of those other kind of programs too that students can get connected to. So kind of in addition to the collegiate recovery space, because folks in there are really kind of having that kind of broader goal connected to like being in recovery, right? We also have kind of these other pieces for folks that might be in kind of a little bit of a different space, but are still needing some support.
So I think being a student
Yeah.
that is looking to start recovery,
Yep.
or, you know, all the other areas that student wellness kind of connects with.
Yep.
If I want my organization to have Green Dot training, if
Yep.
I want to learn more about the food insecurity
Yes.
efforts on campus, how can students get in contact with you, the office? Can they just walk in?
Yep.
How would I do that?
Yeah, so we have an email address as a great way to get in contact with us, studentwellness@asata.edu. Our phone number, 515-294-1099. Our website has a lot of really great information as well, so if you just Google student wellness at Iowa State, it'll pop up. So that has a lot of good information. We have a lot of student kind of involvement opportunities, so a couple of paid opportunities. So our student leadership board is a paid opportunity. Our Peer Wellness Educator program is a paid opportunity, but then we also have a variety of internships. Some are paid internships, and then some are kind of like for students doing academic credit or other things. So students that want to get involved in really any of those can get connected. So we have interns connected to food security, so they help a lot with the food pantry on campus and some other food security efforts. We do have some connected to our collegiate recovery program. So oftentimes we have a lot of students in like psychology or others that are looking to get into like the field around addiction and things. So we have them get connected to us. And then we also have a lot of students that get connected to us around Green Dot and other things too. So kind of broader power-based personal balance. Mental health also is a huge one. I haven't even talked about that yet. That's a big issue. So that's an area too. So there's a ton of opportunities for students to get connected. We're actually kind of in the process too of, it'll take a little while, but moving office spaces. So actually half of my staff is in the student services building and half is in Friley. So you could actually go to either place. So you can visit us in Friley or you can go to the student services building. We're actually kind of all eventually migrating over to the student services building. So a lot of the folks that are either have moved into the MU or are planning to move into the MU, we're kind of dominoing into those spots. We're the last of the dominoes. So we're eventually going to be moving in there. So so they can stop in and visit during open hour times. We always have students that are at the desk. So kind of as a first point of contact. And if they want to set up a meeting and that kind of stuff, they can get connected to us. Most of our meetings, though, we actually do is like online scheduling through Navigate. So if students want to get connected to well-being coaching, to the recovery community, to dietitian support, any of that kind of stuff, most of that is actually all done through Navigate, just in terms of ease of access for students of being able to schedule that. So that's probably the easiest way actually to get connected, but any of those options are good.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. I think just one last thing.
Yeah.
You know, we talked with Dr. Younger a couple weeks back about the new telecounseling service.
Yeah.
And talked just about the fact that, you know, it's coming to campus and some of the details were still being sorted out at the time.
Yep.
How would students go about engaging with that new telecounseling?
Yep.
Like, how would they access? And
Yep, it's a
schedule
really
those
great
things?
question. We're really excited about this. One, because it's just going to increase access to some much needed support that we know that students need. So I would say there's really kind of a couple ways that students can get connected. So they can call Student Counseling Services. So it's 515-294-5056. And they can talk with them, and they'll help them in terms of getting connected to the telecounseling. Also on the Student Counseling webpage, there's a specific page that's dedicated just about telehealth counseling, and it has all the instructions with the link on like how to register. So students can kind of walk through and immediately get connected there. Or they can call directly to the to Student Counseling Services, and they'll help them get connected there too. So very, very excited about this because it's 24/7 access.
Wow.
Also has some crisis counseling available too. So in the past, we still have crisis text line that students can connect to. We have some of the phone lines, but also being able to do the crisis counseling, you know, right away in person too, like just having all the different options, because some students are gonna feel more comfortable with texting, some with the phone, some with telecounseling, right? So having different options and layers based on student barriers, we want to be able to have all of those so that we minimize as many barriers as possible for students. So it's a really, really great addition that we are very excited about having within student health and wellness in general.
That's awesome. I know when on the student government side of things, when we heard about this originally from Dr. Younger,
Yes.
we were super happy. And
Yes.
then, you know, now it's implemented and ready
It
for
is.
students. And
Yep.
so we are just as happy and excited for that to be on campus
Yep.
as you guys are. But we
Awesome.
do want to thank you
Yes.
for being here, sharing your expertise
Yep.
in everything that student wellness does.
Yep.
We thank you so much for
Yep.
coming down to the Student Innovation Center with us.
Yeah. Thanks, Jaden. Thanks, Jacob.
Yeah,
Pleasure
thanks
to be
for
here.
coming on.
Yeah. Appreciate it.
Well, it was awesome having Brian on today. He's such an amazing, administrator, great service. He provides great service to students. And he also just knows his stuff. When he was just rattling off like phone numbers, I was like, oh my God. Like I barely know my own phone number some days. Brian, fantastic guy. He's always setting aside time for students. I think, last week I texted him about an hour and a half before I needed him to be somewhere. I was like, hey, Brian, can you be in this room and like talk about what the wellness division is, up to with the, in regards to, working with the city? And he's like, yeah, I'll be there. and just like set aside his night for that on the spot. And yeah, I just love Brian. It was great having him on.
No, and I think something we discussed when we had Dr. Younger on in the last episode as well is like our administrators, their hearts are on campus. I mean, you heard from Brian's story. He, when he was in college, he was suffering from different things concerning his own wellness. And I mean, even straight A student almost dropped out, like he said. And so like he has that personal experience that is guiding him now as, the director of student wellness. And so I think that makes him qualified in himself. I mean, in the past 5 years, I didn't even know student wellness was that young. Doing everything. I mean, we could have been here for hours talking about everything student wellness does. And so I think, it was great to have him here to talk about the things we did.
Yeah, and again, I know Brian talked about it, in the interview, but if you, need access to any resources about any of the programs, or you're curious, any of the programs we talked about today, or you're curious about any other programs that the Student Wellness Division might offer, really encourage you to go to their website and just check out what they have. Everything is, they're free resources. If you're struggling with something, you deserve to have the support you need to, get through college. Make the most out of your time here. And so yeah, that's what those resources are here for. And I know Brian and everyone over on his team wants you to engage. So really encourage you, any students who are listening, to go check out those resources and make the most of it.
And while we had a great conversation out here with Brian, I do have to toss it back to our people in the back room, Maddie and Sundar. We love you guys back there, making this podcast actually being able to be heard by people instead of having this just be a little three-way conversation. So as always, thank you. And to all of our listeners, thank you for discussing the state of things. All right, and that is a wrap for episode 2.